academic year. I'm going to be starting in January, finishing off my master's degree. And I'm very fortunate in the fact that my governors have said that they will contribute to that degree. They've said that because, I'm a head teacher at a school in South London, and they said that last year they were very gracious in my first year of being at the school, and I got a pay uplift, which was very gracious of them, and it took me above the threshold for the grade of head teacher I was. So it was very generous. But obviously, for those reasons, they couldn't do the same this year. But they said instead what they were going to do is they were happy to contribute towards my master's degree, which I thought was fantastic. And that led me to wonder whether this was a common thing, whether, I know, as we found out last week, there are a lot of people who are studying for their masters, a lot of teachers who have taken that plunge and been very brave to do two things at once, to, do a very stressful career, which is teaching and working in a school, but they've taken on that added responsibility of studying for a master's. And very often, a lot of the staff that are doing this have their families, they have other commitments as well. And it's a very time-pressured opportunity for them. But very often, that comes as being self-funded. So I don't know. That's what I want to find out tonight. How common is it for schools to fund masters or postgraduate degrees? Is that something that should be doing? Is that something that should be happening? Do you think that schools, as a matter of course, should be encouraging their staff to teach MAs? And tonight I'm going to be talking to Dr. Kulvaran Atwal, who is a head leader of learning leader, at a school called Highlands Primary School. And when I put this tweet out last week or week before, asking whether schools paid for MAs, whether this is how people fund their MAs, Kulvaran came back to me and said, actually, the school that he's at, the school that he leads, they fund 60% of the masters for their teachers, which I thought, wow, that's really generous. So I want to hear from you today. Have you had to speak to your head teachers, your governors, about funding your masters? Is it something you'd feel comfortable doing? Because like I said at the beginning, talk about money is not a very comfortable subject. When you have to talk about going through threshold, or when you talk about whether you're entitled to get your go through the next pay grade, it's not a comfortable subject to talk about, but it's an important subject to talk about. And when it comes to your personal development, I think if there's an opportunity, this is my personal opinion, if there's an opportunity for somebody else to pay for it, then why not? Especially if it's going to benefit the school, especially if it's going to benefit your immediate, the teaching learning in your school. And I think it's important that those within the school are able to see that value. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So if you've got that experience, and I tweeted, I sent a message out also to the National College of Education and to Women's Ed, because I know that the National College of Education are doing something very, very important in terms of master's degrees. And I'd love to hear from anybody who may be doing that qualification as well. But I'm going to be talking to Kulvaran Atwal a bit later on in the show, and he's going to be telling me about why his school fund master's degrees, where that came from, because being a head teacher myself, I know how tight the budgets are, and I know how important at the same time CPD is. CPD is crucial to staff development, and that's one of the things that helps with staff retention. If you have a good CPD program in place, and if you can put that, when you're advertising for teachers, if you can put that in the adverts and you can promote that as a reason to come and work at your school, you're more than likely going to get more candidates applying, because I think, okay, this school will value me and value what I can bring. And so it's really important that I think if there's an opportunity for schools to pay for masters, and they should, but how does that happen? Because if you've got quite a few members of staff and they all want to do masters, how does that work out? If you're a 2-form entry school, or you're if a 3-form entry school or a secondary school, and you put that offer out for individuals to do their masters, how do you manage that? So I've got Dr. Kulvaran Atwal, who's on the line now. Welcome to the show, Dr. Kulvaran. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. How are you?
Thanks for inviting me. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you absolutely fine, loud and clear. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm borrowing my son's headphones, so hopefully that's working well.
Your son has very good headphones, so he's done a good job lending them to you. So, before we go any further, you just want to tell the listeners a bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, I'd love to. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I've been a head teacher at Highlands Primary School, which is East London, for those of you who know London, in the London Borough of Redbridge.
Okay.
And I'm in my ninth year of being the head teacher there, and I'm also currently head teacher of another primary school near Barking, a five form entry primary school
Oh,
where
wow.
I've been an interim head there for almost 2 years.
Okay.
That school's requiring improvement. Highlands was requiring improvement when I first got there too.
Yeah.
So in terms of my own professional background, I've had an interest in engagement in teacher professional learning right throughout my career because I just think it is the most powerful lever that
Sure.
leaders have in impacting upon children's outcomes. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm passionate about teacher learning and passionate about teacher engagement and action research and master's level study, and that formed my doctoral research.
Okay, so before we go in that direction, I just need to ask you. So, my job title is head teacher. Your job title is head learning leader.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the two? What would you distinguish as being the difference?
Just to emphasize as far as we often can, as possibly can, the word learning.
Okay.
So whereas and not that I've got anything against teacher, but whereas teacher can imply a sort of power relationship where one person has the knowledge and the other person is there to get the knowledge. I see the focus on creating a learning oriented organization, so a learning culture. So whether you're a head teacher or you've been teaching 30 years or you're a child at 4 years old in reception, everybody is learning, everybody is improving. So just that emphasis on learning. The other thing, the reason why I call myself a head learning leader is because I see my primary responsibility beyond safeguarding, of course,
Yeah.
to be responsibility for the learning of the staff. So
Okay.
I look at the staff team as my class, and so I support their learning in the same way that I want them to support the learning of the students in their care.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you for explaining that. And that, I've heard of. I know somebody else who took over a school, and that was a title, the learner of leading, that they kind of attributed to themselves as well for much the same reasons. Now, I'm talking about tonight, for those that have just joined, we're talking about master's degrees, we're talking about postgraduate degrees, and not the fact that last week we talked about teachers that are doing them while they're teaching, but this week it's about the funding and how we finance them. And Nicola Ark said that they're doing a master's through the National College of Education, and it's fully funded through the apprenticeship levy. And I know that's one route, but in your school, and what kind of really intrigued me was that you said, Colvin, that um, you fund 60% of the master's degrees that your staff. And I wasn't sure if that was for teachers or for all staff. So how does that work, and why have you made that decision?
Right. So we when I first became head teacher at Highlands, I we weren't in a situation where we could do that. So
Right.
the commitment was we engage in research collaboratively as a community of learners, as a leader. But fundamentally, we can see that the level of criticality by partnering with the university, so the discipline of engaging in a master's level program, is
Mm.
a really powerful way for teachers to engage in reflective practice. In terms of funding, I started my doctorate in 2012 and became, I'm sorry, 2008 and became head in 2012.
Right.
So I'd already realised that the greatest single factor that impacts upon the quality of children's learning experiences in schools. So if you take out the home,
Yeah.
just in school, the greatest factor is teaching.
Okay.
And and
Mm.
so as a leader, the best way I can impact upon children's learning outcomes is by enabling teachers to learn. And master's level study is a way in which teachers can engage in learning over time to make fundamental changes to their practice. So I think we've got a real imbalance in this country that we do not. I'm going to say
Hmm.
right away that we probably spend a lot more on average on CPD, or what we call CPL, because we want that emphasis on learning.
Yeah.
And when I first proposed that we were going to pay for teachers to do masters, within our little network of head teachers, many were reluctant. They didn't want to support that, because
Right.
firstly, they felt by investing in teachers and enabling them to do a masters, that they may lose that investment when those teachers leave.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, firstly, I think we've got responsibility to develop teachers for the profession, not just for our own
Sure.
school.
Yeah. Yeah.
But secondly, I thought that was really short-sighted, because I
Mm.
calculated that if we paid for 60% of a teacher's module, which is a piece of learning over a term,
Yeah.
at that time in my first year, it was equivalent to the 3 days supply cover.
Right.
And if you are investing in your teachers' learning, you are demonstrating that you value them, that you are willing to invest in their development, that you are there to support their growth. And honestly, if you're working with people who feel that the values of the school are aligned with their own values,
Mm.
then it might sound really strange, and I won't be able to give you the data, but they're less likely to be sick. They're less likely to be off. They're less likely to have stress at work. They are released to be the best they can be. So we have seen a return on that investment year on year. And I'll give you one point.
Yeah.
In 9 years, since that second year, we've paid for 60%. And the reason we don't pay for 100%
Hmm.
is because if you pay for all of it, then for an individual teacher to do a master's, they have to make a personal commitment, don't they? They're going to
Yeah.
be
Yeah. That's right.
studying at home, and so they need to make a little bit of
Yeah.
financial
Yeah.
commitment their own to commit to it. But in 9 years, we have spent a grand total on advertising, retention, and recruitment of staff of £28 in
My
9 years.
gosh. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
we've got to think of we've got to be more expansive in our thinking, and think by investing in our staff, we are saving thousands upon thousands in terms of other areas of the budget.
Yeah.
So that's the fundamental question of how we afford it. That's how we afford it. We commit to staff learning. And just another point is, we've got teachers at a school that are now doing their second masters,
Wow.
or,
Okay.
or beginning their doctorates.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. It's interesting you should say that about the weighing up the cost of the masters against things like supply, because somebody else tweeted just earlier this evening, Dr. Keith Watson, and he did his doctorate back in 2000, 2004, when he was a middle leader. And I kind of said, how on earth did the school manage to, and that was funded by his school. But he made the same comparison in that the cost of a day course plus supply cover was about £225. So for
Yeah,
2 days of inset a year is the same cost as a doctorate in education.
yeah,
And he did his in his own time, holidays, weekends. And so therefore the value, as you're saying, the value to the school far outweighed the monetary cost to, that they were outlaying it. It's invaluable. So
yeah.
your staff that, and please, those that are listening, please, if you've got similar experiences, please do feel free to text in, because we'd love to hear what your experience of studying for a master's and being paid, or your school contributing fully or partly towards that master's is. Because your staff obviously see you as the head learner of learning leaders, excuse me, and they're following your example. So when they are studying, so do you give them also time during school to kind of study as well? Because again, it's almost a monetary cost there as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because if you believe that the greatest way of impacting upon your students' learning is by enabling your teachers to learn, then when is the best time for them to do that? Is it during the day when they have the energy and and commitment to be able to do it, or is it
Yeah,
something you're going to add on to the end of the day when, like most of us, if you've been teaching in class all day, you're shattered.
yeah, that's a
So,
good point.
yeah, you've got to give the time and space. And honestly, you've got to think about it. Imagine, as a school leader myself, that I'm leading a team of master's level critical, creative, independent
Wow.
thinkers.
Yeah.
It's not going to be difficult to lead a team like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh. So how many staff would you say, like, what's the most number of staff you've had at any one time that have been doing a master's degree?
So when we first worked with our local university, which was the University of East London,
Yeah.
they would, because of the if you had a certain amount of people engaging in that module, they would come to the school to
Right.
undertake
Okay.
to do the sessions. So even then, like when I did my masters, I had to go after school, travel to university, and whatever else. So you're making it as easy as possible, but you use the sessions that the university staff are leading as part of your weekly PLMs, what we call professional
Mm,
learning meetings.
okay.
So
Yeah.
there might have been 8, 10 people doing the module, but everybody got the opportunity to engage in the literature, to listen, to engage in the dialogue. And then what would happen is the people that were actually submitting an assignment, a dissertation for the module,
Mm,
they would have an extra study group on, say, for example, the Thursday after school.
okay.
So you made it as easy as possible for them to do that. But when you have people engaging in master study through their own work, collaborative planning with their team, they're sharing their ideas. So not
Mm,
only do they benefit, but other colleagues benefit, even if they're not doing the masters themselves.
yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. So when teachers are deciding on their masters, is there? So when I continue my masters, because I started it in 2004. I'm going back to and did the postgraduate certificates. I'm going back to do the full masters next year. Um, do you? Is there some autonomy in terms of what they decide to do, or does it specifically have to be education, a master's in education, or can they choose another discipline, something that interests them specifically?
Well, I can see you've got some really, really good questions set up. Because yeah, that's the question people ask. Is it to meet the needs of the school,
Yeah.
or is it to meet the needs of the individual? What
Mm,
you've got to do is you've got to find a balance between the two. So
okay.
what we do is we select really general, overarching modules. So the module could be creativity,
Right.
or the module could be learning through talk, and
Okay.
then and it's general enough for each individual teacher to be able to get an overview of the literature, the research. But I would not prescribe what the individual person's focus is on what they decide to do. So that is up to them according to their context. They have autonomy. And when it comes to their dissertation, which is
Mm,
so imagine you do 4 modules, 30 credits each,
yeah.
and then you have a 60 credit dissertation. That is entirely up to them. Now, if someone
Okay.
if someone decided they wanted to do, I don't know, a cross stitch dissertation because they were desperate to leave the school and do something different, you,
Yeah.
that hasn't happened. So I've never been in
Okay.
that situation. So I trust, yeah, I trust staff to be able to. But what you can't do is you can't prescribe it. You can't say,
Yeah.
right, you want to do a module, you've got to do a module on phonics because
Yeah.
that that
Right.
is that is on our school learning plan.
Yeah. 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 No, that's good, because I think when you become too prescriptive, then it takes away that passion from that teacher to want to actually then do it, because they're not doing it for themselves. They're doing it for you, because you're telling them what to do, as opposed to, this is what I have a passion for. And I guess you want staff to retain that passion all the way throughout their study.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to remember as a as a education system, we are masters level poor in terms of
Yeah.
every teacher in Finland, I
Yes.
think,
Yeah.
is expected to do a master's.
That's right.
Yet in this country, I think the figure, and it hasn't been documented, but it's been speculated that between 2 to 3% of teachers are master's level educated.
Yeah.
I could quite easily be sitting at a school with a higher proportion of master's level teachers than any other school in the country, because we'd
Mm.
be nearly near 50%.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, we are looking at, because I was looking at the Finland model when I was kind of, looking at the whole concept of master's level degrees. Because I remember reading about it years ago, and found an article that you know, it's a 5-year master's degree for primary teachers. That's something you have to do. But even then, there are so many people that want to do it. And it says in an article that I found from 2015 that only 7% of applicants in Helsinki were actually accepted onto that master's level degree. And I think what they've done in Finland is to raise the value of teaching and you know, put it on par with lawyers and doctors, because you know, and that, which is how teaching should be.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Now, just going back to when I first started teaching, and I was working in I started my NQT in Stratford, East London, prior to the Olympic Stadium or Westfields.
Yeah, I know those days. Yeah,
it was a very different place, and I had a panic when I became an NQT, because I really, from someone who didn't particularly enjoy the secondary school or even university in terms of that sort of transmissive form of education. I really enjoyed my PGCE because I was engaging in research, I was learning, and then I was able to put things into practice. And then I had a panic when I started as an NQT, because I looked around and realised that these sort of 1-hour staff meetings after school weren't going to enable me to engage in research. So I approached the university where I did my PGCE, and I asked them if they'd let me do my masters, and they said, "Yeah, of course." But when I told my school at the time that I wanted to do a masters, they discouraged me. They said that a masters was appropriate for an NQT. You're going to have a very tough induction year. You ain't going to have the time. And so what I thought to myself is, didn't think I could afford not to do it, because I didn't see how I was going to. I knew what I was good at. Like, for example, I was really good at teaching maths, but I knew I wasn't good at teaching reading or literacy, because I didn't get enough of that on my PGCE. And so when I was discouraged, I thought, what do I do? So I did the only thing that I could do, which is ignore their advice and start my MA in secret. So I had to do a master's in secret. In my NQT year. So I saw the value, because I in no way think I could have been as good in my second or third or fourth year. For example, I think I could have been a good teacher, but not as good as I became, because I was working with lots of children with social, emotional, behavioural difficulties. So my dissertation focused on how we can ensure the curriculum meets a child's social and emotional needs as well as their academic. I would never have got that otherwise.
So you know, the challenge that you had with trying to, you know, unfortunately unsuccessfully convince your school of the merits of doing a master's, because I think, again, sometimes it's underestimated that just because you're an NQT doesn't mean to say you've had a life. For a lot of people, they've had a life before teaching, and they've not just come into teaching at that point in time, but then also they know their own minds. So, and then you spoke also about currently head teacher or previously head teacher colleagues who were very uncertain about the concept of encouraging their teachers to do masters. So what advice would you give to teachers who are in that position where their schools aren't very encouraging, and maybe just because they're not enlightened in that way?
Well, firstly, the other thing that I make really clear is we don't compel every teacher to do a master's, and we don't somehow impede their development. So I've got leaders at our school who, if you've just got married and you've just bought a new house, and you've just taken on a new responsibility at school, it might not be the right time for you to do the masters. So we don't it's not a detriment to anybody.
Sure.
So everybody gets the opportunity when it's right for them maybe to do a module, then take a term or two out, then do another module. So for those teachers who are unable to do their masters, what I would say is they can still engage in reflective practice. They can still engage in research-based practice. Having said that, I would still think that they should knock on the door and say that this is something that they would like to do, and would the school support them in doing that. The other thing is, if you've done a PGCE or a Bachelor of Education the previous 7 years, you may still have 60 credits from your course.
Right. So, that's a good tip.
yeah, you're a third away from taking a degree. You might have other qualifications. If you've done an NQT program, you could write that up and get supported to get 30 credits. It's all about the reflection.
Yeah.
And you don't just have to go through that one route of going to university, going out there and doing 2 years, 3 years, whatever it takes. Other programs, like the MPQ Middle Leadership,
Yeah.
and that all of those should give the opportunity to get master's credits. And it's not just about ticking the box and getting a degree. It's the reflective practice in actually undertaking the piece of writing.
Okay.
By
Yeah.
reflecting on what have I learned, what am I going to do differently as a result of this. And because my doctoral research looked at what factors impact on teacher engagement, usually if for people to engage in masters, the biggest thing they are worried about is time.
Right. So yeah.
Right. How am I going to do it?
Yeah.
I've got two young kids. I've got to pick them up on the way
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
So make it as easy as possible in terms of time, which is what we talked about earlier.
Sure.
The other major thing that people are worried about is writing.
Yes. Yeah.
They feel that they've done their qualifications, they've got their job, they don't want to be going back to school, they don't want to be doing the writing. And I don't believe that you should be able to demonstrate learning only through a written assignment.
Okay.
Your university should be more creative, enabling you to demonstrate your learning and your understanding. So
right, I'm going to ask you to hold that thought right there, Colvin.
Okay.
Because I'm going to come back to the after the news, because I think that's a really important point in terms of the writing thing. Because that's when I don't mind the reading, but the writing. So I think that thinking of creative ways, I would give you a bit of time to think of the creative ways as well, because I think those that are listening might actually benefit from that advice. So we're going to go for a short break with the news and some adverts, and then I'm going to come right back to you. Okay.
Brilliant.
Introducing Amanda Davey. Amanda is one of the first specialist teacher assessors for dyscalculia in the UK and offers dyscalculia tutoring and bespoke training for schools. With 26 years of teaching and tutoring experience in the UK, Amanda offers specialist online tuition focused on building confidence and developing skills. Amanda also offers online and face-to-face training on dyscalculia for educators, informing practitioners as to how to identify children that may have dyscalculia and how to support them in class. Find out more about Amanda and what she can offer you at www.amanda-davey-dyscalculia.co.uk. Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. At Creative Resources, we've been rethinking what a classroom can be. We've created a huge range of more than 2,500 original and exciting resources that span across more than 15 different subject areas. Whether you're looking for primary or secondary level resources, careers options, PSHE, arts or humanities, Creative Resources have the resources for you. We offer full curriculum packages and unique, challenging escape rooms themed on topics such as Shakespeare, Tudors, and fractions. We have quizzes, task cards, Tarsia puzzles, and lots more. Better still, more than 100 resources can be accessed for free. Just visit our website, www.CRE8TIVEresources.com. You can get 10% off any order you make on our website by using the discount code TT Radio. Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Megan Goods.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News. A new study published in the Science of Learning journal has found that children who enjoy school are more likely to be successful than those who do not. The study found school enjoyment strongly associated with later achievement in age 16 compulsory GCSE exams, even after adjustment for socio-economic background and cognitive ability. Pupils who reported enjoying school scored on average almost a 3-grade increase across all subjects and were 29% more likely to obtain 5 or more A-star to C GCSEs, including Maths and English. The report also found that at age 6, girls were more than twice as likely to state that they enjoyed school than boys. The latest figures show that students are now more likely to choose to continue with their education. Of last year's cohort of school leavers, 66.5% were in higher or further education 9 months after leaving school, the highest number since records began in 2009. The number of those in employment went down, however, from 28% to 21.3%, the lowest figure since records began. Students that were unemployed rose from 5.8% to 6.8%, and higher education was the most common destination for school leavers at 42.9%, followed by further education at 23.6%. That was your latest Teachers Talk Radio News.
You're listening to The Late Late Show with me, Amanda Wilson, and I'm joined this week by Colvern Atwell, who is the head learning leader at Highlands Primary School and Uphall Primary School in East London. And we're talking about funding master's or doctoral degrees, because a lot of teachers are taking that high level study and they are taking that brave move to do those two things at the same time. And sometimes staff are having to fund that. I'm in a very privileged position. My governing body has said that they will part fund my master's degree, which I thought was, great of them to be able to do. But not everybody is in that situation. And as myself and Colvern are discussing, it's, what can schools do to make sure that they value the teachers that they have, and as we talked about earlier, retain that, because if teachers are investing into their teachers, not only are they investing into their school as a whole, but it means that they're more likely to retain those high quality teachers. And one of the things that we started talking about before the break was the whole aspect of you've got the reading and you've got the writing as well. And Colvern, you were about to tell us about other ways that you were saying, universities need to probably, think of other creative ways to enable teachers to share their learning.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I first started my doctorate, and you think we associate doctoral research as a sort of, how would you describe, the holy grail or the ultimate in terms of academic achievement. But yet it's such a traditional form. You have to stick to this formula of writing this or 90,000, 60,000 word thesis, whatever you want to describe. Now, what I said in my first week is, why shouldn't you be able to demonstrate your knowledge and understanding and learning through a form of dance? And they sort of laughed at me, but I was trying to make the point that learning doesn't just happen on paper. This is just one way of showing it. What we tended to do, and we've got one of the teachers at my school had a real fear of writing, because of her dyslexia is a spectrum, isn't it, in terms of how it impacts upon you. But writing can become a chore. It can take twice as long for you to do something that another person finds easier. So what we did is we tried to create an environment in which the focus was on the learning. So if the concern is the writing, we could offer you support with the writing. We could get you to think about how you frame your ideas. In the same way we would expect a teacher to do with their students, is if the concern is the writing, that should not be a mitigating factor for someone who's an educated professional to be able to demonstrate their knowledge and understanding. Because fundamentally, the reason I'm encouraging these guys to do their masters is to enable them to become more self-confident about their own practice. If
Okay.
you understand the factors that actually impact upon success for your children, you become more self-confident, you become more autonomous, and you will have less stress in what you do. That is the key purpose. So my thing for leaders is to urge them to enable teachers to make it easy as possible. My final thought on that one,
Mm.
remember I said that I think it's my core responsibility to lead the learning
Yeah.
of staff.
Yeah.
Now, only recently, the Chartered College DFE are talking about each school having a CPD lead.
Yeah.
I would go further than
Mm.
that, and I would say that it should be the responsibility of every head teacher to see that their role is actually to lead the learning of their staff, and
Yeah.
that sets the climate throughout the institution.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know for anyone that's listening, whether they're in this position, and obviously, you can remain as anonymous as you want to, but the challenge comes, I guess, when not every school has a head that is as forward thinking and as innovative and as encouraging and understands the value of that constant learning, and and works the way that you do. So you've got some teachers who may love their school because of the environment and because of the other things that it brings, but don't have that kind of leadership from the top when it comes to CPD. What do they do then? If there's anybody that's listening who's in that situation, please feel free to text in. What do you do? How do you influence it, Calvin?
Well, first of all, I think I would agree that it's more challenging because one of the things we do is we encourage that. In my research, one of the things that teachers said that most came up more often than anything else that they felt was fundamental to their learning was opportunities for collaboration.
Right. Okay.
And schools are very strange environments in which most of the time people are working in isolation within their
Yeah.
own classrooms. Other environments, other workplace environments, which I studied as part of my research, like construction sites, steel workers, hairdressing salons, they are much more open, expansive learning environments.
Okay.
So what I would say to individuals is, if it is not encouraged at your school, what opportunities are encouraged to engage in learning over time? So the programs I discussed earlier, like for
Yeah.
example, the MPQs,
Yeah.
or even mentoring a member of a student teacher, or your NQT year, all of those things will give you the opportunity, despite the learning environment in your schools, to engage in a piece of reflective learning and submission of a piece of writing or piece of work that will enable you to build towards your masters, so that even if you only have to pay for one module or just your dissertation,
Yeah.
it's going to be less of a burden than paying for the whole thing. So when
Yeah.
I first did my masters, I was quite clever in that. If you'd already been at the university, they gave you a discount for your first module. If you mentored a student teacher
Right.
from the university, they'll give you a free module. And so, one thing I will sympathise with teachers is I'm calculating that when I first started, I was paying something like £260
Yeah.
per
Yeah.
module.
Yeah.
When I first started enabling my teachers to engage, it was about £1,000 a module. So we were
Yeah.
paying £600, they were paying £400, and I've no doubt that it's going up year on year. So it is
Yeah.
becoming more difficult, but there are creative opportunities out there to enable teachers to make those steps to at least get some credits in the bank.
Yeah. I mean, one person who tweeted said my school wouldn't even fund me to do the MPQSL, let alone the masters. So they decided if they were they're going to have to self-fund it, they'd do it properly, and did do her masters. And she says that now her school want the results of the research once it's finished, so it would benefit them.
No, well, I'm really sorry, Amanda, and I don't want to come across critical of schools or school leaders, but what you've just shared is typical.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think honestly, I think that often schools are really short-sighted,
Yeah. Okay.
and
Yeah.
they think sending a teacher off on a course for one day
Mm.
is an investment, but actually, all the research will show you that quality change involves teachers trialing, making changes to their practice, engaging in relevant reading, engaging in learning over time. And I think the system doesn't help us.
Mm.
The reason I use the word learning is because in our system, we're focused on performance. So
Yeah.
teachers are judged on performance,
Yeah.
schools are judged on performance, systems judged on performance, and we become performance oriented. And in
Mm.
fact, we should become learning oriented. We should be developing children as learners, independent, critical learners, and the same for our adults. So I do feel their frustrations, but the reason I'm really selfish. The reason I do it is because I know that by investing in the staff, that we're going to have the best impact upon the children.
Yeah. And what impacts are you seeing on the children? How is that translating?
All right, so I'll give you just some crude, simple examples. Well, we
Sure.
never, when I first became head at Highlands, I took the sort of John F. Kennedy approach when in 1961 he turned around and said that we're going to have people on the moon before the end of the decade. Now he
Okay.
had no idea how that was going to happen,
Yeah.
but just by saying it and articulating it, he enabled people to believe that. So when I went into the school that's requiring improvement, I inherited a staff team that was on its knees, that were told they were either inadequate or require improvement, that didn't have an understanding of their craft. So
Right.
what I said to them is that I'm not going to mention Ofsted at all.
Okay.
We're not going to have any judgmental lesson observations. We're going to engage in collaborative action research. We're going to engage in learning over time, and you are going to decide the roadmap for the future. We are going to learn about teaching and learning, and we are going to share that practice, and we're going to write our own teaching and learning policy. And what I then said is that within 5 years, there will be no Ofsted inspection team in this country qualified to assess us,
Okay.
because we will be so advanced in terms of our master's level, what have you. Now, those same, and we never mention Ofsted, and I'm not interested in the judgments, outstanding, whatever. But when you're a required improvement school, it impacts on the community,
Yeah.
it impacts upon how parents feel, it impacts upon the flight of children from that school to a neighbouring school.
Yeah.
Those same teachers that were told that they were inadequate and require improvement are the same teachers that led that school to outstanding in everything.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the second point in terms of outcomes is Highlands received the Mayor of London Schools for Success Award 4 years in a row, and that award is awarded to schools who have the highest progress for the lowest prior attainers.
Okay.
So the children that come in at the lowest,
Yeah.
their progress over time. And what I will tell you is that the best schools with the best teachers in terms of master's level critical teachers
Mm.
will have an impact on the most disadvantaged,
Mm.
will be most inclusive. And that was achieving that award 4 years in a row. We are one of only 12 of the 2,000 plus primary or secondary schools in the whole of London to achieve that
Wow.
award 4 times. And we don't even do anything. We don't even do anything for it. So our outcomes are like 87% expected at the end of Key Stage 2,
Yeah.
90% phonics, GLOD, whatever.
Yeah.
But that isn't by focusing on teaching to the test or anything like that. That is
Mm.
by empowering the teachers, which is why I think in some
Mm.
ways, in football terms, it's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you
Yeah.
invest in your staff?
Yeah. 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 So do you, when you're setting it, obviously without getting too much detail, but when you're setting your budget at the beginning of the financial year, then do you intentionally kind of think, right, we need to put a bigger pot of money aside for, because obviously you've got the other CPD that happens throughout the year as well. So is that, a conscious effort from you and your governors to make sure that there's always that pot of money for this type of CPD?
Yeah, no
Yeah.
doubt. So if anybody says, how do you afford it? Well, I've said that we afford it because we cut costs in terms of recruitment,
Yeah.
advertising, supply cover. But yes, from my second year as a head teacher, I had to, I think in the second year, we took the CPD budget from something like 3 or 4 grand up to about 16 grand,
Okay.
because we had to ensure that there was sufficient money in place to enable 2 modules during an academic year. So what we tend to do is we tend to do a module in the autumn term,
Right.
and then a term off, and then a module in the summer term, because then
Okay.
that gives you a time to do all the other CPD that you just talked
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. Okay. So every member of staff does the modules at the same time so that you can get the economies of scale.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then when it comes to dissertation, by that stage, people are fairly independent, and
Yeah.
dissertations are different because people have a different supervisor.
Mm.
By that stage, they're able to just get on with it themselves. And I'll just give you another example. Is I was asked to become interim head of a second school, as I mentioned earlier, in the local
Yeah.
authority, and that school was in a terrible position in terms of requiring improvement, but had gone downhill since that judgment.
Right.
A falling role because kids are leaving and going to the outstanding school down the road.
Mm.
COVID, everything possible in a perfect storm that you could imagine.
Yeah.
Yet still, one of the first things I did was enable everybody to take the option of doing a
Okay.
master's, and we've got 8 teachers there now
Wow.
doing their dissertation, and I can tell you, I've had no involvement in their topics and what they're doing. I just read their assignments.
Yeah.
But the buzz of energy
Wow.
between them, in terms of, we're requiring improvement, we're valued, we're learning, we're developing. The impact is sometimes, sometimes from my strategic perspective, Amanda, I'm just sitting back and watching it.
Yeah.
And letting them get on with it.
Yeah, that is so powerful, and I think it sends a very clear message to those on the outside in terms of what the school values most, and so how does that learning from those teachers? There's so many questions I've got. Does that learning from those teachers, does it permeate outside of the school? Do you share that experience with other schools in the local area?
Yeah, and what happens is, once you've, I mean, it sounds really straightforward, but when you've got a master's, you just feel a bit more confident
Yeah.
about the fact that what you're talking about is research based rather than just
Yeah.
intuition based or tacit knowledge.
Yeah.
And so very quickly within the first at Highlands, by year 3 or by year 4, we suddenly had 5 specialist leaders of education at the school,
Right. Okay.
because the early years lead, who'd done a dissertation in terms of critical thinking in early years, had put herself forward as a specialist lead for education.
Right.
The PSHE lead, who focused on factors that impact upon emotional well-being for children, had become an SLE for that.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
all these people had developed specialisms, reading, SLE for reading. And
Right.
so they then impact, without just impacting by saying, I've got a master's, I can support other schools.
Yeah.
They use that knowledge to work their way through other vehicles of school-to-school support. And
Yeah.
the other reason is that we're supporting this second school because we've got this capacity. We've got this
Yes.
leadership capacity. I can't be an expert on it. I could be an expert on teacher learning. I
Yeah.
can't be an expert on early years and an
Yeah.
expert on
Yeah.
English
Yeah.
and an
Yeah.
expert on maths. But the best leaders surround themselves with people who know more than them about stuff. So
Yeah.
by enabling them to be experts on it, they then have the responsibility and expertise to develop beyond our school.
Yeah. So for those teachers or for those staff, because obviously you mentioned teachers a lot, and in a few of the schools that I've worked at, we've had graduates who are teaching assistants. Is that offer open to support staff?
Yeah, it is
Okay.
it's open to support staff, but sometimes the university, depending on their module, won't have support staff. So, for example, if the university are doing a module for teachers, then I've had support staff saying, can we engage?
Yeah.
But they don't always get the accreditation,
Okay.
which isn't fair. But then that's outside of my control.
Yeah.
What we do tend to do is look at a program to enable, for example, we call our support staff learning coaches to then undertake schools direct, and then become
Yeah.
teachers,
Yeah.
and then become masters and what have you. But if somebody didn't want to become a teacher but do a degree or do a master's, then we would still support them to do that, because the right is inalienable. It doesn't matter what you're doing, whether it's a doctorate, whether it's a master's. You know, if we're paying 60%, we should pay 60% for everyone.
Yeah. Because that's what I was thinking in terms of, it's about opportunities for all, isn't it? And
Yeah.
and there's no point investing in one group of staff and them going to another level if you're then leaving another group of staff behind, and they need to have that same level of understanding in order to help with the direction that learning within the school is going to.
Absolutely, spot on.
Yeah. So how do you, as somebody in this position, how do you, or are you an evangelist for this kind of thing? Do you kind of go out there and meet other head teachers who are talking about the quality of their staff and saying that their retention's awful and they can't recruit? Is it something that you are passionate about enough to sort of tell everybody?
Yeah, well, first of all, because I developed through my doctoral research, I developed a conceptual framework which I call
Right.
the dynamic learning community, which focused on theories around situated learning, so workplace learning theories, which
Okay.
haven't really permeated into schools in any way. So
Mm.
they are much more commonplace in health and social care.
Okay.
So the conceptual framework I developed was quite unique, which is arguing that more learning takes place informally in schools than through formal learning activities, like your
Yeah.
5 training days and your 1 hour after school each week.
Yeah.
So when I completed my doctorate, I decided to publish my book, which is called The Thinking School: Developing a Dynamic Learning Community.
Yeah.
So that book has gained a lot of interest because it provides a model for schools to follow to enable a master's level study. Engagement and action research is part of that.
Right.
So I'm often asked to speak at conferences. So tomorrow morning I'm presenting at the Festival of Education, and next Thursday I'm on the panel at the NAHT National Conference.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say I'm an evangelist. I don't necessarily go out there, but if
Yeah.
people ask me to speak, I am going to bang the drum
Yeah.
of actually we're missing a trick here. We lose too many teachers to the profession. We have too many teachers whose learning and improvement plateaus in their third year, and that we're missing this most fantastic lever for school improvement is through the professional learning and development of staff.
Yeah. And what involvement have your governors had in this whole, the environment that you've created within the school?
Each school I've worked at where I've put forward the proposal in the way that I've described to you today, governors have supported it, and then when they've seen the impact upon the outcomes, they themselves, whether or not they really completely understand it, but they themselves will highlight the fact that that they have approved the spending on master's level engagement for teachers, and that's one of the reasons that we've got such high outcomes.
Yeah, that's really good. And is that something that was, you said obviously you went from inadequate to outstanding. Is that something, the way that your school was noted by Ofsted?
Yep, I think so. I think indirectly, I think by the time, because it's a long old journey, isn't it, for requiring improvement? It's like requiring improvement to good, and then you get the old 1 day visit which says you're still good but could be better, and then a year and a bit later they come back again. So it's a long old journey. But we had a real battle with the inspectors because they didn't get it, they didn't understand.
Right.
But what they said is they've never seen a staff team that, well, whoever they spoke to or whatever at whatever level all said the same thing.
Okay.
Or had the same understanding of pedagogy in terms of the teaching. They said they'd never seen anything like that. The other thing they said is that they'd never come across a school community during Ofsted who seemed so relaxed.
Wow. Okay.
Because we never worked towards Ofsted. So
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I think because I don't know from their viewpoint. I've been on a couple of Ofsted inspections, but when you're in that, you tend to see a certain type of reaction when you go into a school.
Yeah.
But the whole purpose of engaging people in master studies is so they're more confident.
Yeah. Yeah.
That they
Yeah.
know what works.
I guess that that makes total sense, because if it's something that you do day in, day out, you do it day in, day out, and it doesn't matter who comes through your door, they're going to see that same consistent approach. They're going to see the same thing, whether it's in September, whether it's in January, whether it's a Monday or Friday. That is the culture of the school, so that's what they will always see.
Yeah, definitely. And also it's about the fact that we also have a very distributed leadership model, which we expect every member of staff to see themselves as a leader.
Yeah.
And so they are expected to input into decision making at a whole school level. It's very different from a hierarchical model, which is head tells the deputy what to do, deputy tells assistant head what to do. And so it's not a culture of sort of power, compliance and control. It's much more of a collective thinking and collaborative decision making.
Yeah.
And so then people become more confident because they understand what they're doing, rather than, for example, I'll give you an example. I went when I first started at the second school I'm currently leading.
Yeah.
I had a little walk round, and it was December. It was a bleak, cold winter's day, and I had a walk around the Key Stage 2 classrooms, and bearing in mind there's 20 of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I noticed that in every class the children were sitting in rows, in pairs.
Right. Okay.
And at one point I thought maybe it was like a Victorian days, so that we put them all in rows.
Okay.
But no one was dressed up. And so in one of the classrooms I said, "Oh, why have you got the kids sitting in rows?" And she said, "Oh, because we've been told to." And I said, "Oh, okay. What? Why? Well, you've been told to do, but why?"
Yeah. Yeah.
She goes, "Oh, I don't know." So
Right.
I walked out there and I thought, well, she's got the kids organised in a way
Yeah.
she doesn't understand.
But she doesn't know why. Yeah.
And then I went into another class and I spoke to the guy and I said, "Oh, why have you got them in rows?" And he goes, "Oh, because we've been told to." And I said, "Why?" He goes, "Oh, because it will support pupil talk." And I was like, "Well, we at our school, as part of our masters, we've done dialogic teaching following the work of Robin Alexander, and you can't have a dialogic classroom if the only person you can talk to is the one person
What's next year? Yeah.
you're sitting next to." So what I did, that was on a Friday, and what I said on the way out, I said to the teachers, like, "Listen, guys, on Monday morning you can have your classroom however you want it.
Yeah.
So and I'm not going to prescribe to you. It's up to you. You know your kids. You know your context. If it's working for you to have them in rows, keep them in rows.
Yeah.
If you want them in groups, tables, have them in groups. If you want a horseshoe, have a horseshoe. If you want to mix it up during the day, mix it up.
Yeah.
Whatever you decide works best for you is up to you." Now, Amanda, on Monday morning, I walked around that school, 20 Key Stage 2 classes. Guess how many of them still had the kids in rows?
I don't want to say 20, but I'm going to say 20.
Not one of them had them in
Okay.
rows.
Wow. Okay. They were just waiting for someone to give them permission to change.
Yeah, not one of them had them in rows. So just consider the fact that you had 20 teachers working in a way that A, they didn't understand the purpose of, B, they didn't necessarily agree with. Imagine what was going to be the impact, why that school was and that's what happens with schools that are struggling. The mode of leadership is to control, and whereas really what you want to do is empower.
Yeah, because that was going to lead me to another question, actually, because that I guess almost answers, I think, a question, because I was going to ask whether there were any staff that were reluctant to follow that model in terms of being, the lead learners and wanting to develop themselves personally, because sometimes you've got those teachers who have been in the job for 20, 30 years. They've seen there's nothing new under the sun. They've seen this model come and go. They tried this back when the ILIA existed. It didn't work then. Why is this going to work? Have you ever encountered those kind of staff who are just oppositional?
I'm not going to say no, because it would be unrealistic to say that. But what you've got to do is you've got to give everybody the opportunity.
Yeah,
you've got to ensure everybody gets the opportunity. And then what happens is, you maintain people's dignity, because after a while, people may realize, well, actually, is this the best place for me? Because they can easily find a job elsewhere. The one thing I would say, it's not to do with years in the job. It's to do with individual dispositions. One of the things that came through my research is that people have individual dispositions to learning, which are influenced by their life histories and their work histories. And now I can influence your work history, but I can't influence your life history. So really what people realize after a while is, wow, this is the direction the school's going in. Can I keep up with this? Can I not keep up with this? But it's sometimes it's people who've been teaching a long time who are really adaptable and flexible and open to change, and someone in their second or third year that isn't. But once you've established that this is the direction the school's going in, what you then do is you only promote or recruit people who are aligned with that vision. So very quickly, particularly at Highlands, some people who didn't want to be part of that suddenly realized that these young, enthusiastic master's graduates or whatever were going to get promoted, and they might not. But that's because we make the decisions in the best interest of the students, not in the best interest of the adults, or according to how many years someone's been teaching.
We're going to take another short break, and then afterwards I've got another question for you, because I know that you've kind of got to get your sleep in for the festival tomorrow. So we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to wrap up the interview with one last question for you. So just stay there, and we'll see you after the break.
Okay, no problem.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Megan Goods.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News. A new study published in the Science of Learning journal has found that children who enjoy school are more likely to be successful than those who do not. The study found school enjoyment strongly associated with later achievement in age 16 compulsory GCSE exams, even after adjustment for socio-economic background and cognitive ability. Pupils who reported enjoying school scored on average almost a 3-grade increase across all subjects, and were 29% more likely to obtain 5 or more A-star to C GCSEs, including maths and English. The report also found that at age 6, girls were more than twice as likely to state that they enjoyed school than boys. The latest figures show that students are now more likely to choose to continue with their education. Of last year's cohort of school leavers, 66.5% were in higher or further education 9 months after leaving school, the highest number since records began in 2009. The number of those in employment went down, however, from 28% to 21.3%, the lowest figure since records began. Students that were unemployed rose from 5.8% to 6.8%, and higher education was the most common destination for school leavers at 42.9%, followed by further education at 23.6%. That was your latest Teachers Talk Radio News.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Late Late Show with me, Amanda Wilson, and I'm here talking to Colburn Atwell, who is I keep having to read this, the head learning leader at Highlands Primary School and Uphall Primary School in East London. And he is kind of, I think, paving the way for how schools should operate when it comes to CPD, when it comes to learning, when it comes to making sure that you're getting the best staff possible in order to impact on children's learning, because his school pay for teachers to do a module within their masters, which is a rarity, I think it's fair to say. But Colvin, I want to just finish with our interview by mentioning the fact that you said that you had some teachers that are doing their their doctorate degrees. Is that right?
Yeah. Two of the teachers completed their masters and began their doctorates. Yeah.
Okay, and how does that work? Because obviously the doctorates are a lot more intense, a lot more reading, a lot more research. In some cases, there might be some travel to do. So how do they fit all that into their commitments to the school?
I think the simple thing is I don't monitor it. I trust
Okay,
them to make the commitment. And if someone says to me, I need a day to do my doctoral study, I would say that's fine.
right.
And I
Yeah,
think that's really important. Sometimes we make overcomplicate stuff and make things difficult for ourselves. But you've got, when you've got educational leaders who have completed masters and have demonstrated their expertise and are now making that commitment to undertake doctoral research,
yeah,
then you have to trust them to be able to lead their own learning.
yeah, yeah,
And I see that as a sign of leadership and maturity, because I'm very fortunate that I in my first school I worked with a head teacher who trusted me and always used to say to me, like, if you need half a day to do this or you need to do something at home, and it's like some people found that really challenging, but I think
right.
the earlier you get into that self-independent study or whatever routine works for you,
Yeah,
in terms of, some people are writing right at the end, and I'm saying, well, why didn't you tell me earlier? I could have given you some time
yeah,
and
yeah,
space. So it's about empowering people as independent learners to make decisions for themselves. And what you've got to do is you've got to trust that by engaging in that deeper learning, those people are going to be better teachers, better leaders, and better learners. And that I think is a difficult thing for leaders, that leap of faith,
yeah.
because you've
Okay,
got to just step back and let people get on with it. So in this second school that's RI, one of the teachers keeps sending me stuff about what she's written, and it's just so powerful for me to read this level of criticality where she's questioning practice at the school.
yeah.
And,
Okay,
and that is the thing that I think people find difficult, is that
right. Yeah, yeah,
these teachers will then lead change,
yeah,
and that's a good thing. It doesn't have to come from the head teacher.
yeah, yeah,
But if you've got a community in which everyone's empowered critical thinkers, it's much better than having a head teacher who's driving everything, if you know what I
yeah.
mean.
Definitely, definitely. So my final question before I let you go is if you were education secretary, what changes would you implement in relation to staff development, staff CPD, in terms of teacher training, recruitment and retention? What would be your kind of some of your policies that you would like to see implemented?
Well, interesting enough, Amanda, I did get to visit Westminster once, and I met with the then schools minister, David Laws,
Okay.
under the coalition government, and
Yeah. Okay.
he asked me
Oh,
he asked me a similar question,
all right.
but he looked absolutely shattered at the time, so I don't think he remembers what I said. But what I said is, as long as the levers of government policy like Ofsted don't value teacher learning, then unfortunately, we won't see that replicated in our schools.
Yeah.
What I would say is that if we engaged in a national level, as a education minister, um, uh, we spend so much money on recruiting teachers to replace all the teachers that leave between the third and the fifth year, because
Yeah.
they aren't being developed, they aren't being empowered. I do like the new emphasis on the early career framework in terms of
Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah.
But I think that the single most important factor in impacting upon teachers, children's learning in this country, is a whole whole system
Yeah.
strategic program on teacher professional learning.
Yeah.
And you know, I could quite happily design that by at least pointing them to a framework of activities that can enable us to not. And I'm not interested in competing with Finland. I'm talking about collaborating with these countries.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll give you a final example. I do more work with schools in Oslo
Oh, wow. Okay.
than I do with schools in London.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Gosh.
because they're more open to the approach.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's an interesting response, and I'm glad to see that I'm thinking along the same lines as Stephen Laws, and that we've kind of both got that question in mind. It's been really fascinating speaking with you this evening, Colvern, and I really do appreciate, because I know how busy you are, and I do appreciate you taking the time to speak to me this evening. And I hope your talk at the festival this week and your talk at the NAHT next week go really well. And I definitely want to keep this dialogue open. And I'm sort of just down the road in East Ham. I live in East Ham, although I work in Greenwich. So maybe there's going to be an opportunity for me to pop over to your school and see this wonderful practice that you're talking about, because I'm just in my second year of headship, and kind of just trying to implement a few things as I go along. So it'll be great to continue the dialogue, off air, as it were.
Definitely. And I was born and started school in East Ham. So all my family are from all my family are from East Ham. And my mate who lives in East Ham has asked me to come over to watch the England-Scotland game tomorrow. So I might not be very far away from you, but I'd love to be part of the program again. And it'd be nice to continue the conversation. So thanks for inviting me, and I'll definitely keep in touch.
No problem at all. Thank you so much for your time this evening. You take care, okay?
You take care too.
Thanks. Bye. Bye. So that was Colvern Atwell, who is the head learning leader at Highlands Primary School. And what an interesting conversation. And I don't know, everyone's listening intently to the conversation that I had with him about what he's doing at his school, and how his understanding of leadership, in the sense that you lead from the top, is enabling his teachers to be empowered to be leaders as well. And I think that's a powerful concept, because I think if you've got a head teacher that's so visionary and understands that in order to create this environment where teachers are really enthused by their work and enthused by what they're doing, then that will permeate throughout the whole school. And it'll be great to hear, in the last few minutes of the show, if there's any individuals who are also working in schools that are like that, who have that experience of, a school where they really do celebrate CPD, where they really do celebrate that professional development. Because as Colvern was saying, it's not, although we're talking about schools funding master's degrees, it can also come in the form of, if you're doing the NPQSL, or if you're doing another course, then it may be that these things can feed into your master's degree. And actually, I do remember when I worked at a school, when I first started my teaching career, and I started at a school in Canning Town, and Colvern was talking about the fact that UEL, the University of East London, would, if you had enough people who were within the school who wanted to do the master, they would come in and deliver the modules at the school. And I remember that was something that was happening at my school at the time, but because I was a new teacher and I didn't think I'd have the brain capacity to be able to study at that level, I didn't take up the opportunity, which now I kind of think, but I did do a postgraduate certificate in coaching and mentoring, so I did something slightly different. But I think those schools that do invest in their teaching, in their teachers, they're going to get the best, and you're going to see the best. And it's a shame that as a whole, as a country and as a society in the UK, from an education system point of view, that teachers aren't valued enough for it not just to have to be at a school level, that it should come from a national level, that there should be a pot of money, or there should be opportunities where automatically, if you want to go to university to do a master's, it's a, yeah, you know, the schools can automatically find the funding, whether it's grant funding, whether it's the university saying, yeah, we'll fund X amount of places each year. It shouldn't be such a battle to have to do that. I don't know what, you know, those that are listening think of that, but I think it should be something that that comes without fuss and without issue. It should be something that's just available. You know, we look at places like Finland, who it's an automatic right. It's you know, it's not even a right. It's a necessity for teachers to have that master's degree, and it's not seen as something that's strange. You know, you have to do 5 years worth of study, but that 5 years worth of study gives you that pedagogical understanding. It gives you that knowledge that underpins your practice. And I think when you've got that knowledge that underpins, I mean, I just, as Colvern was talking, I was just thinking about that school and how, you know, knowing that it's evidence informed and that what they're doing is based on research, how rich their culture within the school must be, because the staff are teaching and are leading and are imparting that knowledge based on what they have read, not based on what they see necessarily done at another school, but based on their own research, based on their own understanding of, you know, cognitive science and how children learn, and how best to implement different practices in the classroom. That can only benefit the school as a whole. And you know, Colvern's said that he's seen the results of going from requires improvement to outstanding, and that progress that there's made is because of the teachers and their commitment to their learning. And you know, again, it's a model that's clearly worked. It's not just a one-off thing. It's clearly a model that has worked because he's gone into another school, and it's that same mentality. And I guess, you know, going into a school where teachers have felt undervalued and felt like, you know, that they don't have the capacity to do anything, and somebody comes in and says, actually, yes, you do. This is what you're able to do. This is how you're able to impact on the school. And then they're coming to you. I mean, how wonderful must that be for him to be able to see, you know, teachers coming to them with their dissertations of what they've written, to be able to say, look, this is what I've learned, this is what you've empowered me to do. And I think as leaders, we need to be empowering our staff a lot more. And I think we have to be brave enough to not worry if somebody says I want to do a master's, not worry that if they're saying that it's because they want to leave. You know, you can put systems in place to say, okay, you know, if you need to, okay, if we fund your masters, then, you know, you're committed to X amount of years here, or, you know, this, you know, be able to implement X, Y, and Z within the school. But I think we need to be brave enough to say, yeah, actually, if we fund your masters, then as you're studying and as you're doing that work and as you're doing that research, you are then bringing that into your everyday practice, and your practice will improve, and you'll be sharing that practice with colleagues. Because when you're studying, I know that at the moment I'm doing the Chartered Education Certificate in Evidence Informed Practice, and I want to talk to as many people as I can about it, because I'm so excited about what I'm learning. I'm so excited about the new information that I'm gleaning. I'm so excited about what the possibilities are. And so if that's what it's like for me as the head of the school, then so much more for those within the rest of the school who are heading up their classrooms, they're heading up their phases, they're heading up different aspects of the curriculum. They're going to be enthused, and they're going to want to share their learning, and it then becomes something. It's like almost like a touch paper. You know, it just ignites something throughout the corridors of the school. And you become this environment where everybody's just talking about learning. They're talking about practice. They're talking about how best to get the best out of their children. And I just think that's a great place for a school to be. And it does make me, you know, it does disappoint me that there's not more schools like that. It does disappoint me that there's not more schools that want to engage in that. You know, the fact that Colvern said that he's working with more schools in Oslo than he is in London, that's kind of, I don't know what that says about London, really. I don't know what it says about the schools in this country, in terms of the fact that many, and obviously, I'm sure that he hasn't, tried to engage with every single school in London, but when you try to reach out, and I guess you're getting so many not interested no's or not nows or not for us type of thing, then you're bound to want to go to somewhere where they embrace that, they want to be a part of that, they understand the value of being a part of that. So I will definitely be kind of keeping in touch with Colburn and seeing how I can learn from him, because I think, as somebody who's in their second year of teaching, all I could do is learn from those around me. So I think, this has been a really fascinating discussion for me. Last week, we talked about teachers who are studying for their MAs this year, where we're looking at the funding for MAs. And I think the whole, this whole discussion about master's education and doctoral education and CPD is one that could, we could kind of talk about it for ages, but, we don't have ages. I've got to go to bed. I know I've got to get up early tomorrow. We've got governors meetings. We've got, so many things going on tomorrow. We've got an ignition day going on in our school tomorrow, which I'm really excited about. And for those who've not come across that before. So I I was sort of interested in the whole concept of knowledge organisers and knowledge sheets. I'm a bit behind in terms of, catching up on that kind of thing. And I contacted a head teacher in a school in Stockport. And he talked to me about ignition days and the fact that they start their projects or their topics off with this day where they totally immerse their children in the learning by transforming classrooms and, making them into these, not classrooms basically. So, if they're studying the Saxons, they might go back in time to the Saxons and have a whole day where they're eating, sleeping, drinking, and understanding what it's like to live in Anglo-Saxon times. And we're doing something similar tomorrow in our school. So each class we have project week next week, but this week tomorrow they're going to be having these ignition days when it's all about kind of developing the knowledge for children and kind of helping them to get that vocabulary in and get that understanding, get that passion for the learning that they're going to be doing next week. So I know that is going to be a very exciting day, and I know that I'm not even doing it, the class teachers do that, but I know I'm probably going to be shattered by the end of the day, just because I'm going to keep going around to all the classes and seeing what they're doing, taking lots of photos, and just generally enjoying watching children learning. And I think that will be, that's going to be such a great thing to see. So, I just want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to the show this evening. I love doing this show. I love being a part of Teachers Talk Radio. I think, there's a richness that comes from talking, from being able to engage, from being able to share our experiences. And I hope you'll come back this time next week to share your experiences and to kind of, open up the dialogue a bit more. So join me next week if you're able to, 10 p.m, the Late Show. Let's get talking. Let's get the dialogue going. Until then, have a great evening. And, don't forget to listen into the early shows tomorrow morning.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.